So now let's talk about the actual interview and hiring process. And we'll start off with interviewing, of course. You want to contact as many people as possible because a lot of people won't bite. Whether it's onlinejobs.ph or Odesk or contractors that you've previously worked with, you'll find that a lot of times people are in the freelance industry because they, how do I put this nicely, but aren't very dependable. And so they do work when they feel like it, and then they don't work when they don't, and so they won't respond to your emails and that kind of thing. So it's not uncommon for me, if I'm looking to fill a new position, for me to send out 25 messages, 30, 40 messages to individuals, asking them if they are interested in this kind of position. It doesn't mean that you have to send out quite that many, but shoot for at least 15. You don't want to send out 3 and then be waiting for 2 weeks for any of those people to get back to you, because the fact is that they might not. So send out as many as you can, and sometimes you'll be really surprised. The people that you think will get back to you won't. The people who look really responsible and on point aren't. And the folks who you were kind of about may end up actually getting back to you and sounding like really good candidates once you get to know them better. So what you want to do is go wide and interview, or ask to interview, I should say, as many folks as you can that look at all like a possibility. And that initial contact should be via email, or if you're going through Odesk, then it might be through the Odesk message system. As you're working with folks and you begin to send out contact messages for people, you want to really be absolutely ruthless when it comes to eliminating people. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a very business-like way. So if somebody is taking too long to get back to you, they should be able to get back to you within 24 hours, assuming that this is during the work week. And do consider that if somebody, say, is in the Philippines, that they're about 12 hours ahead of you if you're in the U.S. And as such, your Friday afternoon may well be their Saturday morning. So take that into account. But otherwise, they ought to be able to get back to you within 24 hours. And if it's taking somebody 2, 3 days to write back to something that you've written them, eliminate them. Because if they're not being responsive during the interview process, they're clearly not terribly interested. If their English is just terrible, terrible, terrible during the initial email hellos and initial conversation, then eliminate them, because it's not going to get any better if that's the best that they're doing at this point. So let's talk about the initial email that I send out to folks. What I'll say is that, my name is Michelle McPherson, and I run an internet marketing company. We publish websites in various niches, and then I'm looking for somebody to fill a position in my company, a full-time. I tell them I'm looking for somebody to fill a full-time position in my company with the following responsibilities. And then I'll have like a bulleted list, and it'll say article writing, WordPress configuration, plugin installation and configuration, light graphic design, virtual assistant duties, and I'll just make a list of the various things that I've thought of, link building, of course, being one of them. And then I will ask them, well, what I'll say is, I found your resume on onlinejobs.ph, and that is my favorite place to go, and it is where I find most of the people that I work with. Say, I found your resume on onlinejobs.ph. It looks like you might be a fit for this job. Please let me know. And then I'll say, number 1, why you think that you would be a good fit for this position. And number 2, what you've done in the past, what work you've done in the past that is similar to this kind of work. And then I'll say, so please answer those 2 questions. I really look forward to hearing from you, and I hope that we can work together. Best, Michelle McPherson. And I send it off, and I send the same letter to everybody, and they get the same thing. So when somebody replies, the first thing that I look for, aside from did it take them 6 days to reply, or did they reply quickly, is did they answer the 2 questions that I put in there? Because if they are not able to follow the directions in the initial email, then they are not a good person to hire. Now, this is something that when I was 18 years old, I went to go work for a CPA firm, and my boss there would do things like this. And I thought it was just the meanest thing in the world because, gosh, you know what, if they just missed it, and, you know, you got to give people a break. And he was like, no, you know, if you give people a break in the interview process, that's when they are acting their best. And so you're not going to get any better from them outside of the interview process if they want the job. So if they are not working to expectations or not able to respond quickly enough or not able to answer questions that you specifically line up for them during the interview process, then they're probably never going to fulfill those needs in your company later on. So you've got to be ruthless and then ask them very specific questions. And that's why I also number them out so that it's very clear that I have 2 questions here that I'd like you to answer. And if they don't do it, they're out. Now, once I get that initial reply back from them, what I'll usually do is ask them, assuming that that reply back is in a timely fashion, that the English is good, that they've answered my questions reasonably, then I'll ask them to do a Skype interview. So I'll set up a time and we'll get together on Skype. And what we talk about then, I don't do voice interviews on Skype. Some people are a little shy or their internet can be a little wonky, and to be honest, I don't really care about doing voice. I'd rather just type things and do other work in my other window. So we do a Skype chat, and when we do that Skype chat, I'm going to ask them where they are working now. I don't say, do you have a job now? I say, where are you working now? And they know sometimes that you're not looking for somebody who has another job. So if you say specifically, you know, are you working right now? A lot of times they'll just say no, when in fact that might not be true. So I always ask them, where are you working now? And then sometimes they'll just tell you because they think that you know that they have a job or that you've assumed that. So I ask them where they're working now. Now, if they're working somewhere now, they're out. I also ask to see samples of their work. Even if I got them from somewhere like Odesk and I've seen links to samples of their work, I'm going to ask them for that again during the Skype interview. I always ask about the previous experience. Who did they work for? What kind of work did they do? If they tell me that they did SEO, then I'll say, what kind of SEO did you do? On page, off page? And they say on-page SEO, and then I'll say, okay, great. Tell me what you know about on-page SEO. What's the most important factor for on-page SEO? And I'm not looking for them to have the correct answer because regardless of who they've worked for in the past or what they've done in the past, the goal isn't to find somebody who's fully trained, because I think that all of us have our own unique ways of doing things and our own unique businesses. So I can't expect somebody to come and know exactly how I want things to be done. But if somebody's representing to me that, yes, they do know things about on-page SEO, and then I say, okay, what's the most important factor in on-page SEO? And they tell me links, I'm a little concerned because that's an off-page SEO factor, and do they really know what they're talking about? And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. If they say keywords, you know, some people might think that the title tag's more important than keywords, but that's kind of up to judgment. So I wouldn't knock them out for that. But I know now that, yes, they do know what on-page SEO is, and they know some of the elements of that. So you're going to ask them about their previous experience, and then you're also going to ask them specific questions about that previous experience to see what they have learned. You want to ask them when they can start. And that's always interesting just to see what people say. Some people will say, I'm ready to start immediately. I'm very, very interested. And some people will say, oh, well, I just finished my last job and I'd kind of like to take some time off first, so maybe in 2 weeks. And I'm not interested in that candidate because I want the person who wants to be working right now. We'll also discuss our work hours. And there used to be a trend to have folks who are overseas like that, whether it be India or the Philippines or whatever, but work during American business hours. I've never done that to my employees. I don't think that it is healthy for people. If they don't need to be working at 3 a.m. their time, then, you know, for goodness sakes, let them work during their daytime. They'll send you an email at the end of the day, let you know what they did. And then they'll get rest at night like normal people. So let them work during their business hours, and we'll talk about later some of the ways that we can keep in touch with our employees. Like most of my employees are not working while I am at work because the US Pacific Coast Philippines time difference. And that's fine. We make it work. And we'll talk about that. And then you always want to give them the opportunity to ask questions and ask, you need to say to them, do you have any questions about the position? And see what they ask. And it'll give you an idea of how interested they are, or if they ask good questions, if they want to know more about you. It'll just kind of give you a feel for the person. Oftentimes at that point, they'll ask you about salary. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about hiring first. Once you get to the hiring step, how do you decide who to hire? Well, kind of just like eliminating candidates during the interview phase, you've got to be ruthless and you've got to be willing to let somebody go who is otherwise perfect if they don't fit the criteria that we've otherwise talked about. So you met somebody and they're fantastic and they interviewed so well and they were so responsive and they have just the experience and skills and interests that you want, but they already have a full-time job and they plan on doing this job in the evening. I'm sorry, but they got to go, because people have a very, very difficult time maintaining an 8-hour job out of the home and then an 8-hour job once they do get home, and their work will suffer. And it's not because they are bad people, and it's not because they don't want to do their best for you, but it just cannot be done consistently, or is very, very, very rare that will happen. So you got to let them go. Be ruthless. But when you have narrowed it down to a few candidates, the way that I decide between that small handful of folks in the end is to give them a test project to see who the best fit is. So what I'll do with a test project, specifically for this kind of job, is give them a job to write, say, 3 articles reviewing a product or 3 articles about topic X. And I'll give them the titles, and I'll tell them that I want to use this word in the articles at least 3 times. And other than that, they have creative license in the articles. It must be original content. It needs to be at least 450 words. And it needs to be informative and quality and interesting for the readers. Now, go for it. And I also let them know, of course, that I will pay them for their time. This isn't a way for you to get free work out of people, but it's a way for you to test out their skills. You don't want the instructions to be super duper guided, where you outline every paragraph or make it so complicated that they can't do it, because what you're looking for here is responsiveness and ability to solve problems on their own. So if you leave something a little bit vague, like, hey, just write me a really great article about iPhones. I mean, that's a pretty broad topic, so what are they going to come up with? But you can even say that to them, and I've done this in the past too. I've said, hey, I know that this is a fairly broad topic, and I know that you might not know where to go with it, but I'm really just looking to see what you come up with on your own. So please go ahead and do this, and we'll see where we end up at that. I don't want them to come to me and ask me 40 questions about writing an article. That's what I'm looking for in this. And then, of course, I'm looking for the results when they get back. I also don't give a deadline when I assign a test project. And sometimes they'll say, oh, when do you want it back? And I'll say, as soon as you can. And some folks will return it in a day, and some folks will return it 2 weeks later. Now, which person do you think I'm more likely to hire? Well, the person who returned it in a day, assuming that it's good work, is going to be hired before the person who returns it in 2 weeks has even turned in their stuff. So don't give a deadline. Be kind of vague about your instructions, and then pay them for their time. Take a look at the results that you get back. Again, you want the top-notch English speakers, and those are the folks that you need to look at. So look at their articles, read their articles, run a Google search for what they have written in the articles, and make sure that it wasn't plagiarized from somewhere else. And from that bunch, you ought to know who your really good candidate is. So to salary. Now, we looked a little bit at salary on onlinejobs.ph. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I go to the Philippines. It's their English skills and their salary. So you'll need to discuss that with the person that you're interviewing. And the baseline for that would be what they're asking for on either Odesk or on onlinejobs.ph or whatever site you found them on. And I never, I shouldn't say never. I assuming that they're asking for something reasonable, I never, ever, ever negotiate down. I don't try to nickel and dime these folks, and I don't think that you should either. What they're asking for is most likely fair. Now, I have had a couple of folks where I've seen them, and they appear to have some really great skills, but they're asking for an American type of salary, a $20 an hour is, what it would equate to type of salary. And if somebody is asking for that, I might think that it's a typo, and then still talk to them. And see if we can get anywhere from that. But that's the only instance in which case I would try to negotiate down. If somebody's asking for 15,000 or 12,000 Philippine pesos a month for full-time work, I'm not going to negotiate that down. That's a really, really, really great price to have somebody working on your business for you 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So between the salary and the hiring process with the test job and the interviews where you go through the original email and then you do the Skype interview, you've got somebody who's really thoroughly vetted, who's done a test job, you've been able to see their work, and who's committed to working with you on a full-time basis. So now start making a list of all of the miscellaneous tasks that you can hand off to your outsourcer. And in the next videos, we'll talk more about the types of content creation that you can assign to them.